Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News covering the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey, who has taken Whisper technology, worked with it, perfected it as a tracking tool, and found a new location for MH370. Welcome, Richard.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey.
And let's kick off not with the MATA 7806, but a Chinese research vessel. What's it doing?
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation in the media about this Chinese research vessel off the coast of Australia. The vessel requested and received government consent from New Zealand to conduct marine scientific research in the waters around New Zealand in what is known as their exclusive economic zone. The ship is now returning to China, but it's taking the long way round and going all the way across southern Australia, and it's now heading out into the Indian Ocean, lo and behold, towards the MH370 search area.
So why is this vessel taking the long way home?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation in the press about the fact that the ship has also been surveying the underwater cables that link Australia with New Zealand. There are several cables between the countries. There is also speculation that the ship is going to go and have a look for MH370. And interestingly, yesterday and today, the ship stopped several times in en route in the Indian Ocean towards the MH370 search area. And we're showing a couple of screenshots of the vessel from Vessel Finder on yesterday and again today where the ship has stopped for quite a few hours on each occasion.
So why do you think it's snooping around the MH370 search area?
Well, the ship, the Tan Suoi Hao, is surveying Broken Ridge.
Mm,
Broken Ridge is a large geological uh, point in the Indian Ocean. It extends about 1,200 kilometers from the MH370 search area towards Australia. The ship is actually still several hundred kilometers from the seventh arc. And we're showing another screenshot from Google Earth, which shows the seventh arc and the various MH370 hotspots for the search. The ship is not currently searching for MH370. I think it really is doing marine search and geological search along the Broken Ridge.
mm, interesting. Chinese vessels always pique a lot of interest in this part of the world. I can tell you, we had several warships going around Australia about a month ago, and it was almost like World War III down here. So a search
Yeah,
vessel will attract a lot
and
of interest.
and quite
Uh,
clearly, if it is a genuine research vessel, then it will still share its research, especially, for example, into submarine cables between Australia and New Zealand. It'll share the research with the military, and I don't think
yeah.
the Chinese distinguish between military and civilian research that clearly.
Mm. So, Richard, we've got a whole bunch of viewer questions, which we're going to take today. These come from about 48 hours ago, so we're trying to catch up with viewer questions. We're getting to them all. But a comment from I don't. This is. I'll just read it out. YGTOTBJ. Hi Richard, re-Cocos Island P8 refueling, probably not refueling at Cocos due to ramp weight in excess of tarmac weight limitations. Obviously knows his tarmacs and aeroplanes.
Yeah, and every aircraft has a um, landing weight maximum and a takeoff weight maximum. It's not just a question of weight, it's also a question of the length of the runway and the conditions, the wind direction, the wind strength, even the humidity will change how long it takes to land or to take off. I replied to YGTOTBJ saying that several US Navy aircraft have been pictured using Cocos Island Airport in the past. For example, in 1968, during the Apollo missions, several large aircraft, including a Boeing EC-135N, a Boeing KC-135A, and a Lockheed C-141A, were pictured on the tarmac. So obviously the tarmac weight was okay for these quite large aircraft. The interesting response then I got back from YGTOTBJ. Yes, Richard, but that was before both ends of the runway started collapsing as the underlying compaction aggregate had deteriorated with tidal influence. Maybe that's why the runway is undergoing a major upgrade at this time. Very
Mm.
interesting. Cocos Island Airport is, I think, able to have handled bigger aircraft in the past, but it's now limited to around 80,000 kilo maximum takeoff weight. So the official story is they need to spend $567 million Australian dollars so that they can lengthen and widen and strengthen the runway to take P8 Poseidons, which Australia has purchased 12 of and taken 12 into their operations. They've also ordered another two meanwhile, so that'll make 14 altogether. Um, but it appears that the real story is that the runway is actually collapsing, as this very interesting comment shows. And when the Australians bought all these Poseidons, they wanted to use them out of Cocos Islands, but they can only do that once the runway's been repaired and strengthened.
Interesting. Yeah. So 105M has asked, I have a question for Richard. Maybe I have already touched this subject before. Anyway, I would like to know, Larry Vance, in his book MH3 Mystery Solved, states that the marks and clues and the pieces of debris already recovered, like the flaperon, indicate the plane made a controlled splashdown with a pilot controlling everything until the last moment. How does this relate to the hotspot search point that Richard states? Has he had contact with Vance to improve or increase the probabilities of success in some hotspot search? Thanks. Greetings from Argentina.
Well, thank you, Juan from Argentina. We have discussed Larry Vance many times in the past. There are actually 27 comments on my website if you really want to go back through the history. Um, Larry Vance is somewhat contentious. He disagrees with the official report from the ATSB, who not only had the analysis of the flaperon, which was done by the French investigators at Beer, they actually had the flap that was found in Tanzania and they investigated that. And these two items were adjacent to each other on the aircraft. And they concluded the flaps were not extended, and they concluded this was not an attempted soft ditching or even a successful soft ditching like Larry Vance has proposed in his book. Um, I say Larry Vance is contentious because he was an investigator on the Swissair 111 crash, but he disagreed with all the other investigators on that investigation. He also disagreed with the Helios 552 investigation, where he was not one of the investigators. He still tried to get the investigation overturned in the courts. So um, obviously, Larry Vance, I think, is quite contentious, and obviously he's got a book to sell. Back in the 6th of January 2018, a pilot, Captain John Cox, who knew Larry Vance well, organized a meeting. I was invited along with other experts from the IG, the independent group. And unfortunately, Larry Vance had to pull out at the last minute, so the meeting never happened. So, yeah, did I discuss with Larry Vance? Yes, by email, but not in person. And it's a shame that that meeting never took place.
Yeah. Scott Crawford, 4148, asks Simon Hardy, I think it was, said the 777 could fly as far as 100 nautical miles after fuel exhaustion. How far beyond the seventh arc has been searched?
Very good question. It
It
can
is.
actually travel a little bit more than 100 nautical miles, more like 110 or even 120, depending on the altitude at the start, at fuel exhaustion, and depending on the winds. But the search has originally been a maximum of 25 nautical miles either side of the seventh arc. This was predicated on two studies, one done by Boeing, which showed that in almost all cases, without a pilot, when a Boeing 777 reaches fuel exhaustion, it will not land much more than around 15 nautical miles from the seventh arc. Well, that's the assumption that there was no pilot. What if there was a pilot? And what if he was a good pilot and knew how to glide a plane for longer? Then the question is, how far out should we go? Well, 110 nautical miles or 120. They are now considering going out 45 nautical miles from the seventh arc. And again, the second study, which was done by DSTG in Australia, showed that there was a dive of the order of 15,000 feet per minute right towards the end, and that was accelerating towards an impact on the ocean. However, it is theoretically possible to recover from such a steep dive. And if there was a pilot in control and if there was a recovery, then it could be up to 100 nautical miles away, as you point out, Scott.
Yes, it makes it a lot bigger search area, doesn't it?
Indeed, it does.
So Baines 8253 says, sorry to hear there are so many critics of your work. Can you speak to what Boeing, the FAA, and other agencies have done to be able to track planes better so another plane doesn't go missing without being tracked? Great question.
Yeah, it's actually not Boeing and the FAA, it's the ICAO who are setting the pace. The ICAO is the international body that covers civil aviation, and then the national bodies like FAA in the US and other. In each country, there'll be a national civil aviation authority. They follow what the ICAO say, and then the manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus have to follow what the regulators say in each country where they wish to operate. The ICAO has spent now several years bringing in a new system which will be independent in each aircraft, each new aircraft that's manufactured from now on, to ensure that if any event happens to that aircraft, we will get a signal via satellite to tell us exactly where the aircraft is and where it's heading. So in the future, this tracking will be able to solve any mystery like MH370 almost immediately, or at least like Air France 447, give us a last known position which is close to the point where the aircraft may have crashed.
So many good man asks Richard, if MH370 had the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, how quick would it have been found? Would these two countries have pressed various countries in the search to give their radar data up? Thanks.
I'm sure they would have, and we've already indicated with the observation from Captain Martin Smith that the US may have been looking for MH370 just 24 hours after it disappeared. There's also a very interesting press conference given in America by the White House press member, press secretary, and he said very soon after the disappearance that the US were helping their partner Malaysia and had sent US experts to Malaysia to help with the search, and they were suggesting at that point, before any official search started in the Indian Ocean, that a new search area could be opened up and that this would be in the Indian Ocean. So I think the US knew well in advance, and if the president or the Prime Minister of the UK had been on board, I think it would be a different matter altogether, and things would have been sped up quite considerably.
Yeah, indeed. Now, Darwin Stubby 860. And you have to be an Australian to understand what that's all about. Richard, how do you explain the delayed seventh ping? For those who do not know, ping 7 was exactly 30 minutes late. I don't think that's correct.
No, it's not correct. But let me explain how the system works. When the aircraft no longer tries to contact the ground station will every hour issue a "Are you still there, aircraft?" And the aircraft responds, "Yes, I'm still there." And then it resets its 60-minute timer. The timer will also get reset when there's a call, a SATCOM call, for example. And there were two SATCOM calls to MH370, one at 1839 and another much later, 2314. So each of these would reset the 60-minute timer. And right at the end, at fuel exhaustion, we know that the uh, SATCOM system was reset again on board this time because when fuel exhaustion occurred, the power goes off. But then the APU in the tail of the aircraft, when both engines fail, comes automatically online. It takes a couple of minutes for it to do so to get up to speed, but then it also provides power. And it will use up whatever little bit of fuel is remaining in the line, the fuel line to the APU, but that was sufficient for the SATCOM system to reboot, which also resets the timer. So it's a bit more complicated, Darwin Stubby 860, than you make out.
And just to clarify, that is an automatic reset, the last one.
Yeah,
And that means also that the plane is basically out of fuel as far as the engines are concerned and is going to
yep,
crash. Yeah.
yeah,
So that's why the
indeed.
seventh arc is so important.
Yep. But
Yeah,
then we come back to the glide question earlier, and
exactly. Yeah,
how far can you go after fuel exhaustion?
yeah. Now, Andy Onions, 7864, I love some of these names. How circuitous were the last 10 minutes of the flight? Appellation, Ford should give a reasonable direction for that lady, 30 kilometres of potential travel. Can you get height info out of Whisper? Yeah, can you interpret that one?
Sure. The flight in the last 10 minutes, or actually in the last 20, was a little bit of a circle. There was one figure of eight flown. It was a relatively tight figure of eight. It could have been that the pilot was just looking to see if there were any ships on the surface of the ocean. I think one possibility the pilot wanted ships to be there. Another possibility the pilot didn't want to be observed by any ships on the surface. And then yeah, we know exactly the altitude at the point where the radar systems stopped picking up MH370. And this was confirmed at 35,000 feet. We know that there were two step climbs en route, so it may have gone up to, say, 40,000 feet. But we don't know from Whisper the exact altitude. We can only infer that from step climbs and from the altitude at the departure point. So we can interpolate, as you say. We know reasonably accurately where the crash occurred, but that is only within a 30-kilometer radius.
Okay. Pav Lakandovitsky 841. Can't believe my comment made it. I'm curious to know why we shouldn't be talking down people. People should not be talking you both down. I mean, I find it insulting how one questions credibility. I would like to know what would it mean to you both if and when this plane is found.
Well, I would be elated, very excited. I would want to celebrate that it's finally been found. And in a way, it's a tragic celebration. But when my mother died, she requested at her funeral that we celebrate with champagne because she had a wonderful life. And that's the kind of celebration I'm thinking of, bringing closure to the families after 11 years or maybe 12 or 13 by then, who knows. And it will bring safety to the flying public. We've learned a lot of lessons out of MH370. We've just talked about the ICAO initiatives to prevent such a mystery and disappearance ever happening again. So lots of grounds to be positive when MH370 is found.
Likewise, I've been following this from the very night it started. I was actually in New York recording a documentary on Boeing for their 100th year and got up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water and turned my phone on and it lit up like a Christmas tree. And so I didn't get much sleep for the rest of the night. But yeah, I've been following it from, as I said, day one, and I would be absolutely thrilled to pieces to find it, no matter where they find it. They just got to find it and bring closure and stop all these ludicrous, stupid, irresponsible conspiracy theories, ridiculous books that torture the relatives over and over again. And one of the things that we got criticised for earlier on, Richard, was sort of speculating a little bit on some of the aspects. But the speculation we did was simply based on the intelligence we had, and it doesn't even come close to the farcical stuff that's been bandied around over the last 11 years, tearing at the
Yeah.
hearts of these poor relatives.
Well, we definitely have never said it was taken by the Chinese or by the Russians or by the
Yeah.
Americans or by the aliens for that matter. Um, and we have never said it's in the South China Sea or in Kazakhstan. We say all along it's in the southern Indian Ocean. We pointed to the evidence from the debris. We pointed to the evidence from the Inmarsat satellite, from the drift analysis, from whisper data, from Boeing, from all kinds of experts. And in my view, it would be great if all the hotspots from all the experts were searched in due course, and eventually we will find MH370.
Well, indeed. No, now Boj Meester 886 says, "Hi guys, my name is pronounced Boj Meester. I'm the best at Bojing things up, laugh out loud. I'm from the UK. Thanks for the mention." So we're mentioning him again.
Well, unlike you, Jeffrey, who speaks the language Australian, I speak UK English because I was born there. And we have a thing called a bodge. A bodge is when you do something which sort of
Yeah,
works, but you don't quite get it right.
yeah.
And he says, I'm the Bodge Meister. The Meister
Mm,
is a German word, of course, but it means it's also used in England to say you're the master of the art of
mm,
bodging. So, what threw me off is he actually doesn't spell the name Bodge Meister. He spells it Bodge Meester.
mm.
So that's what confused us. Sorry about that, Bodgemeister or Meester.
And hello in the UK. And with that, Richard, we have to wind this up. Thanks, folks, for the great questions and the likes and all the tremendous support. Please subscribe to us. And tomorrow we're going to bring you a lot more questions or a lot more answers to questions. And Richard, thanks again for your time. It's been great as usual. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.